Okay, class. In this video, we are going to study edema. Edema, basically, it refers to the water retention. This water retention may happen in the superficial skin, or in the face, the eyelid, extremities, or even the entire body. Both the classics of 黄帝内经 and 伤寒杂病论 have very detailed descriptions on edema. For instance, the 灵书, the second volume of 黄帝内经, it described that the edema, the onset of the edema may start from the eyelid. What kinds of symptoms or what kinds of signs we can see in the patient? It described as the edema starts from the eyelid. It looks like the silkworm. So it describes the swelling of the eyelid. And further on, this edema may develop to the entire body and eventually develop to the legs and the feet. This is one type of the edema that we're going to introduce. And also, still in the classic tried to analyze the causes and pathogenesis of edema. For instance, 黄帝内经 it already tells us that all dampness, swelling, and fullness, they are related to spleen, which means the edema, we must focus on spleen, but not only the spleen. The root cause of edema is the kidney. It also related to the lung. So the lung, the spleen, and kidney, these three are the key aspects of edema. This is also can be explained from the theory. The functions of the lung, the functions of the spleen, the functions of a kidney. The lung, in charge of the water, in charge of the regulation, the water. The spleen, in charge of the transportation and transformation of fluid. So the water from the food or the water we drink in to the spleen and stomach. The spleen and stomach must transfer this water into qi that we can use, into the waste that is transferred further down to the intestine or the bladder to ferment the urine. If this function got problem, it will result in the dysfunction, results in the water retention, which is edema. So that's the spleen. Another kidney. The kidney in charge of water. So these three aspects that we need to focus on. When you understand these three organs, the lung, the spleen, and the kidney, you also will know how to treat edema from Chinese medicine and acupuncture. From the lung is linked to the superficial skin. So we can open the lung, we can open the orifice, open the pores on the skin, which means we can use sweating, the method, the sweating method to relieve water retention. The kidney and gallbladder are the coupled organs. Because the edema related to the kidney, we also can use a technique to strengthen the kidney function to induce urination. So the two of the most important principles, sweating and induce urination, which can help to treat edema. The edema is the water retention, the physical water from the 5 elements. The earth can control the water So now we got water retention, which means we got excess water in the body. From this point of view, we also can understand that one of the reasons is the deficiency of the spleen, the deficiency of the earth. So in the treatment, we also can strengthen the earth function, which is the spleen function. So that will be the treatment principles of edema. And then when you understand this explanation, you will see the etiology of edema. Dysfunction of 脏腑 organs. It may be one 脏腑 organ or multiple 脏腑 organs. In 黄帝内经, you already explained that edema may due to the heart problem, may due to the liver problem, the lung problem, the spleen problem, and kidney problem. So it got 5 different categories: the heart edema, the lung edema, the kidney edema, the liver edema, the spleen edema. In the treatments, it describes the very simple and practical treatment principles. If the edema is above your waist, if the edema is above the patient's waist, we're going to use the method of sweating. We're going to induce sweating. If the edema happens below the waist, we're going to use the technique to increase urination, induce urination. So as you can see from here, these 2 principles, sweating and induce urination, these 2 are the most important principles of treating edema. So you also need to understand when to use which methods. These principles can guide the herbal medicine treatments, also can guide the acupuncture treatments. For acupuncture treatments, we also going to focus on these sweating and induce urination. In Tang Dynasty, it's about 1,500 years ago. 千金药方, the author proposed that patients suffer from edema, they have to reduce the salt intake, the sodium. So at that time, Chinese medicine already realized that the sodium, the salt, may contribute to the water retention. This knowledge has already been proved by the conventional medicine. So for edema, nowadays, even in conventional medicine, then we need to, in some situations, we need to reduce or limit the salt intake. And as the time moves on, the edema has been categorized into yang edema and yin edema. What we're going to introduce, yang edema and yin edema. So the central differentiation of edema in acupuncture, we mainly focus on these 2, yang edema and yin edema. Yang edema, acute onset, begins from the eyelid and the face and develop to the entire body. Yin edema, chronic onset, starts from the feet, as well as other manifestations that you can see from the notes. But no matter what kinds of manifestation, firstly, you need to understand the yang and yin edema. Edema will divide it into yang edema and yin edema. This is very similar to jaundice. Separate them into yang jaundice and yin jaundice. Yang edema starts from on top of the body, it goes all the way down to the other parts of the body. And yin edema starts from the feet, start from the ankles, and then develop further to the upper body. Edema in conventional medicine, this may relate to the the physical kidney, the heart, such as the heart failure, the liver problem, or malnutrition, or the endocrine disorder. So whenever you see patient suffer from these problems results in edema, you can refer to the explanation here, trying to explain the causes, the pathogen, and pathogenesis. The treatments will be focused on the lung, the spleen, and kidney. And apart from these three organs, 三焦 also very important. 三焦 is the pathways of the qi and blood. But our treatments still will focus on the organs. The root cause is the kidney. The manifestation is in the lung. The yang edema. Mostly the yang edema is the excess, and mostly the yang edema start from the cause is from the exogenous wind, dampness. The location will be the lung and spleen. The edema mostly is deficiency or the combination of deficiency and excess. The causes mostly related to the improper diet, overwork, fatigue, weak body constitution, or long-term diseases. Mostly the location will relate to the spleen and kidney. The yang and yin edema, they also can develop into each other. The yang edema, after long term, it may result in yin edema. For instance, the dampness may develop into damp cold and damp heat according to the patient's constitution. This explanation we have introduced in the jaundice. So, if the dampness develop into damp coldness, the damp cold will damage the spleen yang. It will result in spleen yang deficiency. And spleen yang deficiency further on may develop into kidney yang deficiency. So as you can see now, the excess syndrome, the excess edema of dampness, damp coldness may result in the spleen and kidney deficiency after long term. On the contrary, the dampness in a heat body constitution may develop into damp heat. The heat may result in yin deficiency. Although dampness is a pathogenic yin, the heat will consume the yin, so it may result in yin deficiency. And in this situation, the patient may result in kidney and liver yin deficiency. Thus, the dampness develop into spleen yang deficiency, or dampness develop into kidney and liver yin deficiency. How does this happen? So that's we feel difficult to follow what I have been saying. You can write down the key terms and try to understand the pathogenesis of the flow. Kidney yang deficiency. Yang deficiency also may result in yin deficiency, and eventually it will result in kidney yin and yang deficiency. This is the relationship of yin and yang. So why we spend so much time to explain the yin and yang. We can use all these theory to predict and analyze the development of diseases, the possible development of diseases from yin and yang perspective. the diagnosis of edema. We can see the edema. It may start from the eyelid or from the feet, from the ankles, and then to the entire body. The mild condition, the patient may have an isolated location of the edema, and in severe condition, the patient may develop to the water retention of the entire body. The patient may even develop in the water retention in the edema. The patient may feel tachypnea when lying flat, so the patient will be seated. In an even worse situation, it may be lack of urination, nausea, vomiting, headache, spasm, or even loss of consciousness. So these in conventional medicine or in hospitals in severe condition, you can see these will happen in such as kidney failure, in the final phase of kidney failure, or heart failure, tachypnea. So some of the edema are severe condition, although some are mild situation. For the differentiation, mostly we need to differentiate yang edema and yin edema. So the treatment principles. For yang edema, we're going to dispel the wind and dampness. The reason is because the cause of yang edema may from the exogenous wind and dampness. We can use acupuncture with reducing technique. In edema, we're going to tonify. In edema is due to spleen and kidney deficiency. So we're going to tonify spleen and kidney. We can use acupuncture and Moxibustion, reinforcing technique. The treatment principles will be induce sweating and induce urination. So here you can see the main points, the first two, room 9, summer 28. Previously, when I introduced the Chinese term SHUI, 水, this means water, 水分, 水道. 水分 means separate. This point you can separate the water. 水道, 道 means the pathway of the water. So these two can help to reduce water retention. 三焦疏, 三焦 is the pathways of qi and blood as well as water. That's the characteristic of 三焦. Why we use Wei Yang? Why we use bladder 39? Bladder 39 is the low C point of 三焦. In Ling Quan, spleen 9. Spleen 9 is on the spleen meridian. Spleen 9 also can reduce urination to clear dampness. So this is the characteristic of spleen 9. So now you will understand the meaning of this prescription. Room 9, summer 28. These 2 points may induce urination. This is also the local points. The lower abdomen is also related very close to the bladder. The function to induce urination. 三焦, the low C points of 三焦. So we focus on 三焦, pathways of qi and blood and water. In Ling Quan, spleen 9. And then for yang edema, you can add bladder 13, lung 7. Because this is the location of yang edema, it's related to the lung, related to the spleen. We want to use a sweating technique. Although in acupuncture, we may not have some points that can result in severe sweating, but we can focus on the lung because the sweating is related to the lung. The superficial skin is related to the lung. So we will focus on bladder 13, lung 7. These are all related to the lung. Bladder 13, 肺腧, 肺 is the lung. The lungs, the back transport points of lung. In edema, we're going to use spleen, bladder 20, summer 36, spleen 6. So focus on the spleen and kidney. Kidney, we can use the Moxibustion. Room 4, we can use Moxibustion. Other treatment technique you can use is such as ocular acupuncture, skin needle technique, and 3-edge needles. For edema, acupuncture have certain efficacy, but acupuncture won't be, frankly speaking, acupuncture won't be the main treatment for edema. We have to find the cause, and mostly edema will be treated by herbal medicine. But we have to find the cause to treat the causes. Is it due to the heart, due to the kidney, or due to the liver? We must also focus on the cause of the edema. Patients suffer from edema. We also need to patients also need to reduce the salt intake. Patients also need to monitor their blood pressure because the water retention may result in the increase of blood pressure. Because of some edema, such as yang edema, the causes of yang edema may be due to the wind, exogenous wind. The exogenous wind, in our theory, may result in the common cold or flu that will result in the onset of edema. So when we advise the patient, firstly, they need to focus on the root cause, the actual cause which results in edema. You need to treat the root cause. Less salt intake, and then the patient need to have appropriate exercise, not overdo it, not over-exercising, but to improve the kind of immune system or the antipathogenic qi, prevent catching cold. In this video, we mainly discuss edema. Edema, when we see the term, when we see the patient, we need to understand that this is a water retention. So water retention, or what we need to do, we need to think about the functions of the Zangfu organs, which organs are related to the water. And just don't think about the human structure, the human health. Think about water in the nature. How can you reduce the water? For instance, how can you reduce the water on the ground? Or in your garden, how can you dry the water? Drain the water out. So firstly, the water can be dried when the sun comes, the heat, which we can use Moxibustion or reducing technique. Induce the heat can help to relieve the edema and can help to reduce the water in nature. Secondly, what can we do? We can drain the water out. We can get a pathway for the water to go out. That's the urination. So for acupuncture, we can use some technique to induce urination to help to drain the water out. Another aspect, another common treatment that we didn't introduce here is diarrhea. We can use some technique to cause diarrhea. When we cause diarrhea, patient also can reduce the water retention in the body. So it depends on the patient's situation, depends on what you want to do. These are some technique you can think about. So the emphasis is the organs, the lung, the spleen, and kidney. The treatment principles: sweating and induced urination. The treatment, the focus, the treatment, the points, we're going to focus on the 三焦 plus the organs, the affected organs, because 三焦is the pathways of all qi, blood, and water. Then you plus on the specific organs. Thank you for your attention.